Hello YouTube and welcome to episode 2 of our How to Build a Pole Barn series. In the last episode, we talked about getting started, the very simple rules. What is a pole barn? What is a post frame home? If you missed that, you can still check it out. We haven't gotten into the build yet. Again, just doing some intros, some starting thoughts and collection, and then we're going to break ground and get into our build. So, let me ask you a question. Financially, what do you think is the number one most impacting factor on the cost of your pole barn build? And I'm not talking about the total cost of it is that you're going to pay the builder to build your house. I'm talking about the single most factor. So whether that's the number of bedrooms you have, do you think it's the number of bathrooms you have? Maybe how grand those things are. Is it a huge kitchen, vaulted ceilings, a 10-car garage? Maybe big exterior patio features like having a big in-ground pool or a stone patio with a built-in gas fire pit. What do you think that number one most impacting factor is? I guess for me, comes down to one thing, and that's the old single word saying in the real estate business, and that is location, location, location. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the land and what I see are the three major factors to look out for when considering where you're going to build your pole barn home. So without further ado, let's get into it. You've decided you want to build your pole barn home. Where are you going to put it? Some of you may want to be secluded, no neighbors in sight. I'm talking about far out rural America. If so, this first one may not apply to you, but for the majority of you watching, I'm guessing you want to be right in the middle of suburban America. Now, these three impacting factors I'm talking about today, they're not in any specific order, but the first one I want to talk about are your taxes. If you're watching this video and you're considering building a house, you probably already have a good idea in your head what township or municipality in your general area you want to live in. But maybe it's common knowledge that that's the highest taxed area. And perhaps it's additionally in a village, so not only do you have to pay your normal taxes, school taxes, but now you have to add on village taxes in addition to that. And let's throw a random number out there and say after your assessment, your taxes are going to be $7,200 a year. Let's do the math. 12 months in a year, that's $600 a month. The money goes back into your community and the condition of the roads and sending your kids to school. But in reality, that's $600 a month that you're not really seeing back, at least in your pocket by any means. Are you comfortable with that? Are you building the house and funding everything on your own? Or maybe you do have a spouse and they're not working. Or maybe you have kids and you're sending them for these different programs into a private school and these things. Can you really afford an extra $600 a month? If you can, that's great. If not, maybe you should get a good idea of what your taxes are going to be and then reconsider where you're going to build your house because of those taxes. Now, if you have no idea, just a tip, something you could do. If you have an idea of where you want to live, but you have no idea what the taxes are, call up the township. Most of them have a general idea or formula they can give you where as long as your property conforms to the general quality and style and value of homes in the area, they can give you a rough idea of how many dollars per square foot your taxes will come out to. For example, we called our township. They said it's going to be around $2.10 per square foot. So for us, we had a pretty good idea of the layout of our house already for the house that we designed and would like to build. And we realized that, you know what, this is going to be affordable to us. So just a tip, try calling them up. You can get a good idea. But again, if that ends up being way out of your budget or realistic for you, you should probably consider looking at another township or come up with a list of 2 or 3 places that you may want to build your house. So, moving along, let's say that you picked out a good suburb and there's a good school district, and you know what? The taxes aren't too bad. So now let's talk about your dream home. I want you to picture that dream home. Let's say that you want to build a home for you and your family. It's going to be this beautiful 2-story house, and because you've seen all these great pictures of these barn dominiums with these wide open floor plans and a loft and these huge ceilings, let's say you picture that. That's the house you want to build. You want to build this 2-story house with a very high roof ridge and these vaulted ceilings for the skylights to shine down on your kitchen and open living room floor plan. That's great. But number 2, do you know what the local building code and rules for zoning are? Do you know what that land is zoned for? Let's say that you have it in your head. You want to build that dream home that I just explained with that high roof ridge, vaulted ceilings, and the skylights. But perhaps the building code for your area states the roof ridge of your house cannot exceed 26 feet. Maybe that shoots that plan right out the window. So, number 2, you have to know what you're zoned for and get an idea of the building codes and regulations. Now, maybe you say that, 26 feet is really high. That's probably not something that is going to affect me. Let's give another example. Let's say you're building that dream home, and yeah, you're going to have neighbors, but you want some privacy, and you have it in your head that you're going to do not just the standard 6-foot vinyl fence, you want this nice big 8-foot vinyl fence perimeter. Well, for most townships out there, there's a 6-foot limit on a fence without a variance for residentially zoned property. To provide one more example, even the shape of the house can be affected by the local building code. In our case, we're going to do an L-shaped house where there's the front of the house and then the garage comes off of it frontward from the house. And essentially you would drive up the driveway and you would pull left into the garage, or the house would be directly in front of you. I'm going to throw up a picture here for a second of example of what that would look like. But for our town building code, if the garage is detached, it cannot sit in front of the house. It actually has to sit either flush with the house or extend behind the house. So the question is what defines attached? We thought in our case we were going to have a covered breezeway between the two that we could use to walk from the garage to the house. However, yes, physically you see that they are attached, but by a closer look at the building code, they define attached as being by the foundation and the footer of the house. So in our case, we were able to work something out with the builder where they are going to connect the footer of the slab for the home with the garage, and by definition be attached. However, realistically, from what you can actually see, they're not physically going to be attached. There's going to be a space with a walkway that you can walk right between the two. So some things like that you may be able to alter your plans, get changed. In other cases, if we weren't able to do that, we would have had to move the garage completely back. And that for us would have meant changing the entire floor plan of the house, seeing as we designed our entryway and the doors on that side of the house to match up with how we wanted the garage positioned. We've talked about taxes. We've talked about building code and zoning for the house. The third thing I want to talk about today is perhaps the most important, the quality of the land itself. The reason I'm saying it's most important is, yes, your taxes are important. Knowing the building code and zoning is important, but you don't need to know those things if you can't build a house on the land in the first place. So number 3, we're talking about the quality of the land. And there are a few things that go into this. Some of them are what you can see, what is above the ground. Other things are what you cannot see, and essentially what's below the ground. So, first example, let's say you're scrolling through Zillow, looking at lots of land, and you come across a picture like this. Does anything stand out to you that would tell you this is a good lot or not? For me, it's these guys right here. We're going to throw up a picture of these things. They're called cattails. Where do cattails grow? They really only grow in swampy, consistently wet areas. So right away, this tells me this is a really wet lot. Maybe it's designated as a flood zone or a wetland, and you can't build on it anyways. Sure, you could potentially pay a company to come in and reform the entire land and bring in tons of dirt or stone or whatever and build that up. And maybe you can go through this process and you might get it cleared to build. Maybe you won't. That's a risk you're going to take. It depends on the rules for your state, your county, the municipality you're in. Everywhere has different rules. So again, that comes down to knowing the local building codes and zoning and the departments that go into building, who you'll need to go through for approvals on these types of things. So one, water. Water is a big impacting factor on the quality of the land. That's one example of something above the ground. I want to give you the example of something below the ground, and for that we are actually going to cut over to the real footage of the lot that we found for ourselves here. For the last part about talking about the quality of the land, I wanted to bring you out to our plot of land. I apologize, it is a bit noisy. I'm going to try to adjust the noise in the video here. But the reason I want to bring you out here is because it's not about what you can see, it's about what you can't see. And that thing for us is bedrock. Just several feet below the surface here is bedrock. For square miles, it's a very shallow table, and for a lot of people that impedes on the build. The biggest impacting factor is if you are going to dig out any sort of septic system or basement, that bedrock needs to be blasted away, which means something as simple as a 3 or 4 bedroom house septic system or a basement instantly will add tens of thousands of dollars onto your building cost. Now, because we're doing the pole barn home, it's going to be slab on grade. So in our instance, this actually works to our advantage, because where this lot is undesirable for most, we're going to be able to work with that. Now, we paid our septic company a fee to come out and bore a hole and test how far down they can go before hitting that sheet of bedrock. And for us, it's about 4 feet, which isn't enough for a septic system. However, the grade of this land actually needs to be built up about 2 feet, which means once all that dirt is brought in and this is excavated out and we dig down, we're actually going to have about 6 feet of space and enough room to do a sand trap style septic system. So again, in our case, even though this is a highly desirable area, yet this lot would typically be undesirable to most because of the bedrock, it's going to actually work out in our favor. So that fact, in combination with people being out of work from the pandemic and affecting some of the loans that are in process, and those processing loans getting recalled, actually put us at a unique advantage where we were able to offer $15,000 under the asking price for this plot of land and pick it up. Now, for those of you that decided to look at the timestamp, skip along to the end, the summary here, I'm going to talk about the 3 important factors of what I see needing to be considered when making your land purchase for your build. The first one, and what I would probably consider the most important, is the quality of the land. Reason being, if the land is unsuitable to build on, then what's the point of looking into the other 2? So, quality of the land. Is it a wetland? Is it a flood zone? What's underneath the ground as well? These are some things that, by looking at it, if you're not familiar, you may have no idea. That's all right. You can either hire a professional. For example, in our case, we had that bedrock. We paid the septic company to come in, dig a hole, do some tests down there to test how far down the bedrock was. In our case, it worked out in our favor. Is it a wetland? Is it a flood zone? These are things the town probably already has a pretty good idea and they're familiar with a lot. So call up the township. Feel free to ask them. Usually they'll give you some good advice, at least any history that they're aware of or tests that they may have performed in the past. They'll be able to give you some insight on. So let's say the land is suitable to build. Number 2, taxes. Do you know how much your taxes are going to be in that area at all? Most townships have a general per square foot formula that they can give you to give you an estimate, at least ballpark range about what your taxes are going to be. If that township, it's common knowledge that it's the most expensive for taxes in your area, is that something you're comfortable with? Is it a village? Are you going to have to add on those taxes as well? Earlier in the video, I threw out the example of $7,200. Let's break that down. That is $600 a month. So if your taxes came out to $7,200 a year, are you comfortable paying $600 a month? Is that within your budget? Are you the only person affording this house? Or are you building it with a spouse who is or maybe isn't working? So take into consideration your taxes for the area. And number 3, let's say the quality is good, you can afford the taxes. What are your building code and zoning for that area? Knowing these things ahead of time will help prevent either big changes you might have to make in the future by just having a general idea of what you can and can't do. Do you know what you're zoned for? Is it commercial? Is it residential? Is it mixed use? Each one of those uses have a different number associated with it as well, to what degree and type of residential building, because perhaps it's residential, but it's rated for residential with multiple unit occupancies. Again, if this is something you're not familiar with, call up the town. The listing agent very well may have that information right on the listing as well. And they should know that. If it's not posted on a listing, call the listing agent up, call the town. It's usually pretty easy to do a little bit of investigation and digging and find that out. The reason the building code is important is because you may have that picture perfect dream home visualized and planned out in that blueprint. However, the examples I gave earlier in the video, most towns are going to tell you that you have a height restriction. Maybe it's 26 feet, maybe it's 30 feet for that roof ridge. So if you're picturing building this big 2-story house with a vaulted ceiling, or a 3-story house if you want to go really big like some of these pole barn builds do, perhaps that's over the building code for the area your lot is in. I also mentioned a privacy fence. Most residential areas are 6 feet. So if you had an idea you want to build this nice big perimeter with an 8-foot vinyl fence, you need to go seeking a variance if you're in a residential area. These are just some things you have to consider when purchasing your lot. There are factors that are going to impact you along the way, and just knowing these ahead of time will help prevent you from having to be reactive and make changes and essentially hold up more time in your build, because it's already a long process as it is. There's a lot to go to it. So if you can avoid issues with the building department, with the zoning department, not having to seek out variances or anything like that, it's going to make your process a whole lot easier. So I hope that summarized everything for you. Please, if I left anything to question, feel free to comment and question it below. Like, subscribe. If you want to follow along our build project, we're going to post another video in a few days here as we begin to get into the process of designing our build.